Welcome to the Dough Roller Money Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Berger. Today, in episode 325, I've got a wonderful guest and in kind of a different format. So let's talk about the guest who's on with me right now. Cortlon, say hello to Dough Roller Nation.
Hello, Dough Roller Nation. My name is Cortlon Cofield. Huge fan of Rob. I've been listening for a very long time and very honored to be joining you all today.
That's really a requirement. That's the first question I ask potential guests. Are you a huge fan? And that's why I've had so few guests on the show. So did we meet in Orlando, FinCon?
Yes, we met at FinCon at 17, 18.
Yeah.
I think it was 18. I introduced myself, let you know I had literally listened to every podcast up to that day, and you didn't believe me, and I started raining off like the topic. I was like, oh, he really has listened to every episode.
I didn't believe you. I'm sure that's not a couple of things you need to know about Cortlon. First of all, he's a beast. I mean, this guy, so you've already worked out today, right? What was your workout like? You ran 40 miles, then what did you do?
So I start with half an hour on the Stairmaster, which is usually about 300, take about 200 flights, and then I work out for about an hour and 20 minutes. So it's about a 2-hour workout, and then we didn't meet in the gym as well. And you were going pretty hard. So I believe in that health is wealth, and you got to take care of your body as well as your money.
Yeah, well, you embody that, and you also happen to be a pretty smart money guy. You're a CPA.
Yep.
A test, by the way, that is far more difficult than passing the bar exam. I will tell you that.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, most people don't even pass all of the CPA, or not most, but a lot.
Yeah.
It's much harder than the bar exam. But then you're also a personal financial specialist. That one was new to me. What is a PFS?
Yeah, and I'm so happy that you asked. So the PFS is a supplement for the CFP, and the CFP is Certified Financial Planner. But what the CFP board says is that the CFP and the CPA have so many overlapping topics that you can just take the PFS to just supplement the rest. You don't have to take the because CFP is another 10-hour exam, and the PFS was half that time. So it's basically to bridge the gap to go from CPA to CPA and financial planner.
Oh, I see. Okay, that makes sense. And your company is Cofield Advisors, right?
Yes, sir.
And what do you guys do?
So we specialize in working with entrepreneurs and helping them with business advisory, financial advisory, and then tax planning and preparation. So when I started my firm, I wanted to create a one-stop shop for entrepreneurs to be able to get their business finances, personal finances, and taxes handled at one place.
Okay. And you're in Chicago?
Yes, sir.
Did you grow up there?
Born and raised.
So you're probably not an Ohio State Buckeye fan.
Actually, I went to my first Ohio State game against Wisconsin this year. I drove down with some friends, and it felt amazing to be at a place where football is recognized as being good. So
are you a Wisconsin fan, or is just friends went down and?
No, my friends went to Ohio State, so we drove down to Ohio State for the game, and I went to Illinois, so our team always sucked at football. And it was kind of ironic because Illinois beat Wisconsin this year. Then I drove down to Ohio State, and then they beat Wisconsin as well. So
were there more OSU fans than Wisconsin fans? Probably not.
Well, it was at Ohio State. So
I'm sorry, it was in Columbus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this one was at Ohio State, and it's the football community there. Now I see why you're such a huge fan.
Yeah, they're insane.
It's insane.
Yeah. So when we go to the Maryland game, which we do every other year because it's here in College Park, there are more. And Maryland's not a big football school, but obviously basketball. But there are more. It feels like there are more OSU fans. And now Northwestern is in your backyard, right?
Yep.
I think we played them this year. I can't remember what the score was. Well, actually, that's not true. I think I do. I want to say that Northwestern had a field goal. That's right. They scored 3 points. I think we had like 40. Oh, no, we had 52. Anyway, all right, enough about that. So I mentioned this was going to be a different format, and I'm really excited about this format. I kind of think it's something I'm going to do more often. Here's what we're going to do. Cortlon and I together are going to answer your questions. So I picked, it turns out we're going to have 6 questions. I picked 5 that Cortlon has seen. I've obviously seen them. I have a bonus question that I'm actually going to start with that.
You're going to lead with it. You're going to start with
it? The bonus, yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to start with dessert.
Okay, let's do it.
So the funny thing is, this is just how pathetic I am. this question came in. Normally I get questions via email. This question came in some other way, and I don't remember now, and I can't find it. So I don't remember the person's name who asked it. How bad is that? But I remember the question, and I just saw it the other day. So I must not be aging well. I don't know. But the question had to do with a statement or part of a podcast that I had in the past, in the not too distant past, where I was I was basically saying, dividends aren't as great as some people think they are. And so the question was basically, can you explain further, Rob, why you hate dividends? And I'm thinking, well, hate is a strong word. Okay. So let me kind of repeat my view on dividends. And then Cortlon, you can chime in. You can agree, disagree, whatever you want. The point I was making is this, that dividends in and of themselves, number one, they don't make you richer. When Apple pays a dividend, all that's happening is some of their wealth is going into your personal account and the value of your shares are going down. You probably don't see the value of your shares going down because their dividend is just a small, on a quarterly basis, it's probably a fraction of 1% of the stock price. And when it trades the next day, it's immediately going up and down and who knows where it's going. So you don't actually feel it. And I think that causes some people to see dividends as sort of like free money. It's like they see dividends as a much better way to take out wealth than, say, selling shares. But the reality is, in and of itself, a dividend, not only does it not make you more wealthier, but if it's in a taxable account, you get taxed on it. Well, depending on your bracket, but for a lot of people would get taxed on it. And the way I like to look at it is, let's say you owned your own company and it was worth $100 million and you paid yourself a $10 million dividend. Are you wealthier? No, your company's now worth $90 million and 10 of it's now in your personal account and you're likely going to have to pay taxes on it. Now, that doesn't mean dividends are bad. There's a lot of good things about dividends. I think management that has to pay a quarterly dividend is in that mold, tends to be more shareholder focused. Dividends also get paid out typically by more mature companies, which are the kinds of companies I prefer to invest in. And when stocks are down, and so long as the dividend doesn't go away, sometimes it does, like with the banks and the auto companies in 08, 09. But as long as the dividend doesn't go away, sometimes the dividend can help you stick to your plan because, yeah, the stocks are down, but you're still getting money. So it's not that I hate dividends. It's just that I don't think they're as great as some people make them seem. Cortlon, what are your thoughts?
So I am actually a pretty huge fan of dividends just because I believe in making quote unquote money in all ways from my investments. So the fact that, let's compare it to real estate property, right? Appreciation is not guaranteed, but cash flow is. So when it comes to stocks that, these gains are unrealized, so they're kind of fictional. And I think from an investor psychological standpoint, as you mentioned, just getting some money back on a quarterly basis can help you stick to your plan and make you feel like you're actually quote unquote making money, even if it's a small tax burden to get a dividend paid out to you.
All right. I'm curious, when you invest, how do you factor in dividends?
Factor in
like, is it a major consideration, or or not really?
No, because Apple does Apple pay out a dividend now? They do. They do. Okay. So I don't make it a huge factor. Like I check the dividend yield. If it says no dividends, I don't say like we're not going to invest in it. But I think from an investor psychological standpoint, helping people understand that they can make money in two different ways from their investments can entice them to invest more.
So a lot of it's sort of behavioral finance almost.
Yeah, and I think that's just a huge proponent when it comes to at least my job as an advisor, to really not only key on the mathematical and side of personal finance, but the behavioral finance as well. Okay,
oh good. I'm getting a little feedback. I'm hearing just a little feedback. Are you hearing it at all?
No, I can take my headphones out if that would help.
No. The headphones are probably helping, and it could just be me. I hope so. All right. Good perspective. Let's get to the original 5 questions. Actually, and the first one, I think, is a good segue from that bonus question. So this comes from Jeff. He says, I recently came across a 2-year-old article from Forbes magazine. You mentioned a 6-fund portfolio that you would have no problem investing $100 million in. do you still recommend these funds? I'm currently catching up on podcasts and just ordered the book. Currently have a FA financial advisor, would like to start taking care of my own finances. So the 6-fund portfolio, and I don't follow it as much now, mainly because, honestly, it's because our assets are spread over a number of different accounts, business and personal, retirement and non-retirement, and rebalancing all of that's pain. But so it's more of a practical reason. But the 6 funds were large cap, these were all Vanguard, but they don't have to be. Large cap index fund, small cap value, a developed sort of international fund, an emerging market fund, a REIT fund, and then for bonds, a bond fund. And I would normally put 10% in a REIT, 10% in small cap value, 10% in emerging markets. And then the rest depended on my stock bond allocation. For a long time, it was 80-20. Right now, it's 70-30. And I would have no problem investing $100 million in that portfolio. I can tell you that when I've come into some money, and no, it ain't anywhere near 100 million, but when I've come into some money and I've talked to advisors, not Cortlon, I should say, they sometimes, they want to put me in new stuff that's exotic. You know, they've got their black swan portfolio, or they've got this exotic real estate investment. And I just, I listened and I evaluated it, and I just, no thanks. I think the only difference for me, if I had 100 million, is that I might directly invest in non-public businesses, but I would probably do it not so much because of the investment side of it, although that would always be a factor, but because for some charitable reason or something else, I wanted to be involved in that kind of company. But other than that, I'd have no problem putting $100 million in that 6-fund portfolio. Cortland, what are your views? What's your portfolio look like? Would you invest 100 million differently than you'd invest 500,000?
Yeah, so I'll come at this from like my personal background. So I worked in a hedge fund before I started my own RIA, and I, looked at some of the most exotic derivative portfolios that you can imagine, and they still didn't beat the market a lot. Not to mention after the hedge fund took that 20% cut, right? So I come to the table with a beauty and a love of simplicity. So when it comes to the 6-fund portfolio or the 3-fund portfolio that is in your article as well, I believe that, to your point, when it comes to rebalancing and everything, like, it could become such a pain. And I don't know if the payoff is worth it at the end, especially if you don't rebalance because you just don't want to do it because it becomes too much. So I'm actually a huge fan of the 3-fund portfolio, the total stock, international, total bond, set it, forget it, rebalance once a year. And that is, I think that's a great go-to portfolio because you diversify, and rebalancing is not a pain. And personally, with my firm, I use Betterment. Betterment has their own Vanguard portfolio that has, I think it has 10 ETFs in it. But besides that, I would have all my clients in the 3-fund portfolio and do yearly rebalance.
All right, good. It's funny you mentioned Betterment. I was helping some, young adult in their 20s invest, and they don't, like I was when I was in my 20s, they don't know what an index fund is or, investment fees. And I ended up steering him to Betterment because it's just so simple, and he can understand it, and he can see his portfolio, and he doesn't have to worry about it. Again, I think for folks who have been investing for a while, they recognize that even 25 basis points can have an impact over a long period of time. But what he's doing is far better than not doing anything. I mean, night and day.
I think that's the trade-off, right? 25 basis points. I mean, we can all project it out, put it into our fee calculator, and see how much it's going to be over 45 years. But what's the cost of not investing?
Yeah,
that's a huge cost. So I'd rather get focused on getting everyone started and make it simple than they wait 5 years, because that's costing hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, good. So we are back after a short break. I was hearing some feedback in the audio. I don't know if it ended up in the recording, although for those of you listening or watching, if it did, you're probably totally annoyed at this point. I'm sorry, but we're back. Cortland's in a different room.
Yeah.
You kind of look like you're in some sort of space odyssey place.
Yeah. So again, my high rise has a theater room, and it has acoustics in the ceiling. and it's the most quiet place in the building. So I want to make sure that there's no interruptions on the podcast.
That's your apartment?
My apartment complex. I stay in a high rise. We have amenities. So yeah.
I'm like, man.
No, one day.
All right. All right. So question number 2 comes from Kim. I'm not going to read the whole email. It's very lengthy, but I will summarize. There was a divorce involved. She's dealing with a lot of debt. She's wanting to refinance things like her mortgage to bring the rate down. And the real struggle, as I read it, is do you stop saving to focus entirely on paying off your debt? One thing she says is, we bring in Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey recommends to only save $1,000 while you're in debt. And she says, but I think we need to stop. She says cards altogether. I think credit cards, because when we use them for necessities, we also ended up using them, for non-necessities. But then she just learned about a home equity line of credit that her ex-husband had taken out. There's a balloon payment due next year. And so now she thinks maybe she should pay down as much debt as possible until she gets to the point where she can refinance. She does have some retirement savings. So she's got kind of like a lot of moving parts. And what I want to do first is ask Cortlon your view. Dave Ramsey says, if you're in debt, save $1,000 first, and then take care of all of your non-mortgage debt. Don't invest it all during this time. And only when all of your non-mortgage debt is paid off do you start investing. Do you follow that sort of view, or do you have a different view?
I do not agree with that view per se. I don't agree with any all or nothing view when it comes to personal finance, right? I believe it's personal. You should view each scenario in its own frame. But with this example explicitly, to tell someone not to invest at all, I think is a bad mind frame to put them in. So I try to take it each situation separately and take it from that standpoint. But I do agree with saving $1,000 for emergencies. I do agree with that part.
Okay. And so in her case, and it's hard to give specific recommendations because I'm sure if you were working with her one-on-one, there'd be 100 questions you'd ask her.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, we can't give specific advice, but how do you, I guess really the question that might be helpful to her is how do you, if it's not all or nothing, like Dave Ramsey proposes, how do you follow or achieve both goals of paying down debt and investing at the same time? How do you think about that? And what do you tell people?
Yeah, so I actually created 4 steps that I would recommend her to do based off the information that you gave me, right? This is not direct investment advice, but I think that these 4 steps would put her in the right direction. So would you mind if I went through these?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Great. So she mentioned that she has some monthly cash flow problems, right? So the first thing I recommend individuals do when they come with these scenarios is to perform an expense audit. And an expense audit is very simple. You look over all your expenses and ask yourself 2 questions. One is, do I need this expense? If the answer is no, get rid of it. If the answer is yes, you move on to question number 2, and that is, can I get this at a cheaper cost? So when I sit with clients and they talk about their monthly cash flow issues, after we do an expense audit, you'll be surprised at how those monthly cash flow issues go away because of how much stuff they actually don't need or can get at a cheaper cost.
Okay.
Right? So that would be step number 1. Step number 2 is I do agree with Dave Ramsey. You should build some emergency savings, whether that's $1,000 or whether that's 1 month. But because, most people in this example, as well, she mentioned that they have debt issues because they had unexpected expenses come up, and unexpected expenses are they're never going to not happen. So you need to have some reserve so you can stop digging the hole, right? So that would be step number 2. And then number 3 is just around, refinancing mortgages or refinancing high interest debt to a lower rate. And then number 4 is don't look at paying off debt and investing as it has to be one or the other, right? I know you mentioned this a lot. You can do both, right? You can pay some debt down through some investing. And I just always encourage, don't miss that company match, especially if I heard 7%. So I definitely recommend she would get the company match and then use the extra funds to pay down the debt.
Right. Well, I don't know if this is good for you or bad, but you and I think alike. All right.
Well, I'll take it as a compliment.
Okay. Next one comes from a listener named Frank. Again, I'm going to sort of paraphrase, but he's got a grandchild coming on the way, or they just had it. He just had his first grandchild, and he's wondering how he and other family members can contribute, financial support for the grandchild. Should they set up some sort of trust fund? He didn't mention this, but I suppose, can they contribute to a 529 plan for a grandchild? That might be another option, but he's wanting to know, how can friends and family, contribute financially in support of this new young one? So can you give us some options?
Absolutely, absolutely. So before I give options, I think that it's very important to, when it comes to investing for or trying to save for a child or grandchild, you need to ask yourself these two questions, right? Question number one is, who do you want to own the funds? And question number two is, who do you want to have access to the funds? Because if the child owns the funds, it meshes with their FAFSA when they try to apply for college. If the child has access to the funds, they could use it for reasons that you probably wouldn't recommend they use it for. They could take it earlier than you want them to. So I think you need to first understand, who do you want to own the money, and as well as, who do you want to have access to it?
All right.
And then once you have those two questions answered, now you know what your option. Now you can look at your options. So I am not a huge researcher of trust, and I know the basics, but you have, I think, of 5 options. You could, start saving in a savings account or CD. That's very basic. You could start contributing to a Roth IRA for them once they start working. I think that's a great option. Once they start making over $6,000 in income, which is a basic job, you can start contributing to a Roth IRA for them, which I think is just an amazing head start to give someone.
Right. Obviously, once they get older.
Yeah, well, once they get a little bit older.
Yeah.
But prior to that, you can always open up a 529 plan, because that you can get a state tax deduction for that as well.
Yeah.
And
in some states.
Yeah, it's definitely state by state. You can get a state tax deduction, and if the kid doesn't go to college or gets a scholarship, you can always change the name on that to a different child. And then you have trust, obviously, which are a little bit more complicated. But I think one that people don't mention enough is, add them as a beneficiary to your life insurance policy, right? You add the parent, but also add the child as a beneficiary of a portion of it as well.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Frank asked if I have any grandkids on the horizon. My answer to that is not that I know of. So
Rob, I want to ask you, how would you approach that? If you had a new grandchild on the way, what sort of steps would you take to put them
Well,
in?
when it comes to money, I'm a control freak. So I certainly wouldn't do anything that gave them access to the money. You mentioned the FAFSA, the financial aid, blah, blah, blah. I forget the thing you fill out when you go to college.
Yeah.
I probably should know the acronym. Anyway, I know the acronym. I just,
you know what it stands for?
Yeah. Anyway, it's okay. That would maybe be an issue, although, again, I would go back to control. So I would either just save money on my own in my own name that I eventually gave them, and I'd have to always be mindful of gift tax, but I'd also want to think about how I gave it to them. And I don't have life insurance anymore, but you could certainly put something in your will to grandchildren as a possibility. With trusts, even I'm a lawyer, I couldn't write my own trust. I have a lawyer that's written the trusts for our children. They're all empty, right? They're just used mainly for tax and control purposes. If my wife and I get hit by the proverbial truck. So yeah, that's kind of my view.
Nice.
My view is if I control the money, I can eventually help them if and when I want to. Yeah. I get nervous turning control over to, well, particularly to anyone that doesn't have a demonstrated ability to properly manage money. And obviously a 1-year-old doesn't have that yet. Sometimes a 30-year-old doesn't have that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, some people might disagree with me, but I think the best thing you can give a child is financial literacy itself, right? Not actual money. Because without financial literacy is money soon gone. So
yeah.
The best thing that you can do is begin to educate them early and focus on helping them understand money versus giving them money.
Right. Okay. Next question. is another long one. These are great questions. But this one comes from Paul. And I'm going to, again, kind of summarize. He just got divorced, has 2 kids. He bought out the house, so he has a mortgage. He used money from the escrow to pay off some debt. But he still has a car loan. It's just 2.89%. Has a mortgage at 3.89%. And 1 credit card at 0% until March. So a balance transfer, presumably. Has some money in retirement and has some questions. So here we go. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Question 1. I was thinking of focusing on paying off my car loan first. I'm paraphrasing a bit. Should he do that? Should that be his next focus? Again, caveat that I'm sure you'd ask him 100 different questions, and these are just our opinions based on the question he's asked us. But would you focus on the car loan first if this were you?
Yeah, so just to recap, we have a car loan at 2.89 and a mortgage at 3.89 and a credit card at 0%. So for me, right, and we just look at the debt question in a nutshell, I wouldn't pay more on any of these payments. I would, because at 2.89% and 3.89%, Rob, the difference, the average stock market return after inflation is 8.5%. Right. And if you're paying down these debts at 2.89 to 3.89%, mathematically, you're not doing yourself a huge favor. But I would definitely make sure I would more so focus on paying the credit card off before the interest rate goes up, or try to find another one before the interest rate goes up.
Right.
Because you don't want that, that 28% to kick in.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't focus on debt at 2.89 and 3.89%. But you said something that I want to clarify. Is the after inflation average return of the market actually 8.5%?
Yeah, so it's
because I think that's going to trigger some hate email.
Yeah. I say that so lightly I didn't forget who your listeners are. But yeah, I thought it was 10.5 without inflation, and then 8.5 when inflation was considered since 1930. I can fact check that.
That's okay. Well, yeah, I'll just forward the emails to you.
No, please don't. I don't want that.
So I got to tell you, this is an aside. So when I wrote my book, I had to assume a rate of return, and so I thought, you know what I'm going to do? Because I'm just so smart. I'm going to take Vanguard data back 100 years for a 70-30 portfolio. Mm-hmm. That's 9.3%. Then and that's for obviously not adjusted for inflation. So I'll use 9.3. And then when I want to adjust it for inflation, that's easy. I'll just go, the data's there. What was our average rate of inflation over the same time? It was about 3%. So I assume 6.3% after inflation return. And I footnote this, explain it, tell them there's no guarantee. You can assume your own number. I mean, I did everything I could to avoid the emails and the comments and the, and the whatever. And I think I did a pretty good job, but there's always some people out there. And there was one, I won't name this person. I love him, I really do. But he just went off on this and this whole analysis. And I'm like, did you read all the footnotes in my book? Anyway.
What was his issue, if you don't mind me asking?
The issue was that he doesn't think it's anywhere remotely likely that the future returns will be 9.3% for a 70-30 portfolio. And by the way, I don't necessarily disagree with him, but what number should I use? Just pick a number?
So my thing, if you get hate mail for that, what does Dave Ramsey get for his 12%? He has to have a closet full.
Over the Thanksgiving holiday, I'm at this store with my daughter and wife and a daughter's boyfriend, and they're doing whatever shopping. And there's a little stand. It wasn't a Walmart, but similar to that, where they have a little book stand. There's a Dave Ramsey book. Never read Dave Ramsey. Open it up, and one of the first things he says in the intro is, people really send, I don't know if he used the word hate mail, but over this 12%, but it's actually correct. And I'm thinking, he needs to let that go. Maybe I need to let it go. Maybe that's the case. Yeah. Okay. Question number 2, it's a longer term question, he says, and he wants to know, should he invest money or start to pay extra on the mortgage? Or I suppose, he didn't ask this, should he do both?
Yeah. So this is the age old, debt versus investing question, which, you probably get thousands of times, right? And I think the best way that you can approach this is by looking at it from two different frames of mind, right? You need to look at it from the mathematical side, right? We just talked about the average rates of return and what they are, and I don't want to get to that argument. But if the returns are higher than the interest rate, then that's a simple mathematical equation, right? That's the easy part. The more difficult part is the behavioral finance part, right? Are these debts weighing you down psychologically? Are they not letting you sleep at night? And for me as an advisor, I don't care what the math says. Like, I'm gonna tell you what the numbers say. I am more concerned about what it's doing to you psychologically. So if this mortgage is over your head and not letting you sleep at night, then go ahead and pay some extra on it. But the math is the math, and I think if you need to focus more on the behavioral side for individual cases. How do you feel about that?
I agree completely. And your answer reminds me of an article I wrote on Door Roller years ago. And it had to do with approaching your finances as both Captain Kirk and Dr. Spock. Okay. And I wrote, wait a minute. For you Star Trek fans, I know what you're thinking right now. So just don't send me an email. I mean, it was a great article, the emotional side and the logical side. I wrote this whole thing. It was long. First comment was, it's not Dr. Spock, it's Mr. Spock. And I'm like, really? He wasn't a doctor? Seriously? He's like the smartest guy in the, oh, you're right. Anyway, okay. No, I mean, there is the psychological part, the behavioral finance part. I mean, I certainly wouldn't pay off that mortgage early if you're not getting matching contributions on your 401k. It's such a low interest rate, and presumably, under the current tax law, he may or may not be taking a tax deduction for it. But I mean, I paid mine off early, and it was around the same rate, I think. But it was long after. I mean, I waited many, many years.
And I'll give you a scenario that made me think about this question a little bit differently, if you don't mind. And this really kind of just shook my whole perspective on this. So I had a client a few years back, and her student loans was at like 4.5% or 5%, and then and she went, and she had the question, should I pay my student loans off or should I invest? And I told her the math, and she was like, my student loans are really like, bearing on my soul. So I said, all right, we're going to put all the extra money towards your student loans. She was able to pay her student loans off in 1.5 years. And with that being gone, it gave her more freedom because she actually left a job that she didn't like and started following the thing that she loved to do because she didn't have that huge payment on her shoulders anymore. So when it comes to debt, and I know we don't think about this often, but it's a certain freedom aspect that we're not even considering when it comes to being an advisor and giving these recommendations.
Yeah. Well, and that's why it's so important that for folks listening, even folks where we're responding to questions, if you want specific advice that's tailored to your specific circumstances, you need to contact a financial advisor. You're not going to get that on this show because that's not what we do. And it's not what we can do. We can kind of give you our thoughts on what we would do under those circumstances or some things to think about. But every circumstance is different. So.
And Rob, if you don't mind me saying, I think you would be an amazing advisor. So whenever you're ready to make that transition,
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I took the 65 on the thought that maybe I'd manage investments for folks, but it's not what I want to do.
There you go. Do what you want, as long as you do what you want to do.
Yeah. So we've got 4 more questions that I want to kind of go through quickly. They're good questions from Paul, but the first one is fascinating. And they're all retirement related. The first is he's invested in Fidelity Freedom Funds, which, as you may know, have a pretty high expense ratio. I want to say 60 or 70 basis points. Let me quickly look this up. Freedom Funds, Fidelity. But the question is, while I'm looking this up, is would he be better off getting out of those funds in retirement and simply doing it himself using, if he can, Fidelity, low cost, in some cases free, index funds rather than a target date retirement fund? That's the question.
Yeah. So, Rob, can you pull up those fees in Morningstar? I tried to pull it up prior to our call. I couldn't find the expense ratio. I don't know if Morningstar had an issue, but I'm just really curious on that part.
Yeah, they're around, I want to say 64, but that could be wrong. So I'm looking, for example, at the 2040 fund. Oh, they've come. Oh, this is institutional premium class. Well, this is a good point. In your 401k, the expense ratios could be really low. The institutional premium class is only 8 basis points.
Yeah,
But
so that's what I was
but
saying.
that's not what most retail investors get. Now, you may get that in your 401k. Let me look up the Freedom Fund 2040 for regular folk like you and me. And that becomes, so yeah, see, this ticks me off. If you're an institution, you get 8 bips. If you're you and me, it costs 75 basis points.
Welcome to America.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
So there you go. But yeah, they have index funds that are free. So should he just, freedom funds are convenient, or target date retirement funds are convenient, but would he be better off just using index funds and rebalancing them himself?
I mean, absolutely. With the difference of 70 basis points, we can extrapolate at that over 35 years, and that can become a huge part of your portfolio. I did a scenario in front of a corporation last week, and I showed them what a 1% expense ratio would do over a 35-year period. It ended up being close to almost 25-30% of their entire portfolio. So if you can save on bips, save on bips. I am a huge fan of that.
Yeah, the thing to keep in mind is you just got to do the rebalancing yourself, and you have to be thinking about a change in your allocation as you get older, right? I mean, a target date retirement fund does that for you. So those would be the things you'd have to do on your own. Mm-hmm. But yeah, 70 basis points, let's say, that's a big difference. Okay, next question. He says he wants to invest in VTSAX, that's the Vanguard fund, and in the bond version, I think he just means total bond market fund. And his question is, he wants to open up a Vanguard account. Would I have to open up some type of IRA? Now, I love this question because it underscores just how confusing all of this stuff can be. But Cortlon, I'm going to let you take the first crack. Would he have to open up some type of IRA at Vanguard to invest in VTSAX?
So the answer is no. But I think, one thing that's so important for us to understand is when we know so much, we forget how much we know and how confusing this is to the public, which is always just grounds me every time I hear a question like this. I think it's just so, I think it's second nature to me. But yeah, so you can open up any type of account you want at Vanguard. It could be a brokerage account. It could be an IRA. It could be if you're an entrepreneur, it could be a solo 401k. But the account is not really what matters. It's the investment, right? So he can open up an IRA or he can open up a traditional brokerage account. Now, what's interesting to me is that he compared these, the VTSAX, which is just a total market fund, right? It seemed like he was comparing it to the Fidelity, the Fidelity Target Date Fund. I just want to just give a quick aside that, when we ask these investment questions, you want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples comparisons, because total stock market versus a target date fund, they don't have the same type of diversification. So we always want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind.
Right. Yeah. The thing and this is confusing when I talk to 20-year-olds. I say, look, there's really 2 questions. There's what type of account, and then once you've figured that out, what do you invest in? And in the case of VTSAX, you can buy shares of that mutual fund regardless of what type of account you open up. So the type of account is going to depend on, is this for retirement or not? And then if it is, do you want a traditional IRA or a Roth, for example? And those are important questions, but none of those questions have anything to do with what you actually invest in once you open the account, right? And it kind of goes to his third question. He's waiting until next year to open up a Roth account, and he wants to know, can I buy VTSAX? Well, sure you can. For that matter, you could open up a Roth at Fidelity and still buy the VTSAX. Probably you might buy the ETF version. Oh, you might be able to get the mutual fund version. If you wanted VTSAX, I'd just open it up at Vanguard. Why not? But yeah, they're 2 separate questions you have to answer. Account type, and then what do you invest in?
Yeah, so I give a quick story when I give presentations. And it's just like I asked my friend the other day, a smart colleague, a lawyer, like, what are you investing in your 401k? And he was like, yeah, of course. I said, what are you invested in? He said, I'm invested in my 401k. I'm like, well, what are you invested in? He was like, well, what do you mean? And I had to, so we sat down, and I had to let him know that the 401k is not an investment, it's an account. And I looked it up. I think the stat was around 65 or 70% of people have zero clue what they're invested in inside of their 401k.
Well, and just another story on that. I've talked to people who have opened up an IRA and they've transferred money to it and they think they're done. And they don't realize that it's just sitting in a cash account. And it's like their whole world changes when it's like, well, no, wait a minute. There's a little more work here. We got to figure out what you want to invest in. No. So his last question, another good one. These are all very practical. I love these questions. He's 47. He doesn't say this, but let's assume he's going to retire at 65. When people ask you what stock bond ratio allocation they should have for someone around 50 who's going to retire traditional age, what do you tell them?
So this is such a common question for me. And as an advisor, especially like with FINRA and SEC, like you really have to be careful how you answer this question, because that is so dependent on your situation, right? Like time horizon, when do you want to retire? How much do you have saved? How much do you plan to contribute? What's your risk tolerance, right? What helps you sleep at night? And I mean, it's such a loaded question. I actually want to get your opinion first, and then I'll lead with my answer. But
let me ask you, before I give you my opinion, I'm going to ask you some questions.
Okay.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. How old are you? How old are you?
I am 28.
Oh man, I can't even remember 28. What's your stock bond allocation?
Mine's is, so this is a great question. Mine's is 90-10, right? And before it was 100-0, right? Because I'm like, I know so much about investing, right? And why would I need any protection for validity? But I read a Warren Buffett, one of Warren Buffett's books, The Intelligent Investor. I did the research. And do you know a 90-10 portfolio can actually outperform?
Yep.
I didn't know, like, that's crazy to fathom, right? But yeah, so I'm 90-10.
Well, the problem that we have, so since I started this podcast in 2013. So the people listening, particularly those that are relatively new to all of this, have never really experienced a bad market. They don't know what that looks like, or more importantly, what it feels like. They may know what it looks like. They can, read history, but they don't know what it feels like. And they also don't know what it's like when bonds outperform stocks for years, which can happen. And actually, by the way, the long bond has been doing crazy because interest rates keep going down. And as I remind people on this show, I predicted that rates would go back up in 2010. So far, I'm only 9 years off and counting. So for someone 47, so I'm 53, it's not that big of a difference, I guess. I'm at 70-30. And I feel that's comfortable. I don't think that 80-20 would be wrong. I don't even think really 60-40 would be wrong. It would be wrong for me, but I don't think it would be wrong. But to your point, so much of it, people, I think we tend to put too much on risk tolerance. And there's a couple of reasons I think that. One is the difference between, say, 80-20 and 70-30, if the market goes down by 20%, I mean, there's a difference. But you're going to be miserable. You're going to be miserable. I don't care what your allocation is, unless it's 100% bonds. You're going to be miserable. That's the first thing. The second thing is that do you have debt or not? We have no debt, so I have more of ability, at least psychologically, to withstand a market. Now we'll see how well I do when we get the next bear market. But the other thing that as I get older now, I start to think in terms of. Okay, if I have, let's say, 70-30, my 30% in bonds equals X dollars. And those X dollars can allow my wife and I to live for Y number of years, right? I start thinking that way now. And if that number is, let's just make up a number. If my bond portfolio would be enough for us to live on for 20 years, and you're saying that's a big number. Yeah, I know, but you figure we have no debt, right? Mm-hmm. Do I really need more bond exposure beyond 20 years worth of living expenses? Right? So anyway, it's a long answer. I haven't even answered the question. For me, someone around 50, I like somewhere between 70-30 and 80-20. Because they've still got, assuming they're going to retire at 65 or even 70, they've still got at least a couple of economic cycles to go through.
No, and I actually have never heard anybody frame it like that. Looking at their bond portfolio and projecting it out based off their yearly living number to say like, hey, if things hit the fan, we can just pull from this and just leave our, leave our stocks alone. And That's interesting. You probably need to write an article about that. That's a really interesting topic.
Maybe I will. It's kind of an offshoot of the bucket strategy, right? Because you're putting, your first, say, 2 years in cash and the next, 5 years in bonds. And it's kind of along that same thinking, although a little different, I suppose.
Yeah.
So that's my answer, sir. What is your answer?
Yeah. So I based my answer based off his situation, right? He gave us an understanding of how much he had saved up and his age, and I selected 80-20 just because he has some catching up to do. And I think that 80-20 can work for someone that has a goal of retiring. If you're 47, you say, I want to retire at 65, I believe you're going to do whatever it takes to get to that number. So even when the market's down, you have a bigger goal than what the market currently is. So I think 80-20 for his situation would be fine.
You know, it's interesting. If someone's around 50 and they're behind and they're trying to catch up, they should hope for a bear market and a bad one, right?
And they need to go.
And then they go all in, baby. Right. But it's the exact opposite of what we want to do.
Yeah.
Well, I think I said at the beginning that we had 5 questions. We actually ended up answering more than that, but I think that's because one of them had like 6 subparts.
Yeah.
But I think that's all we've got. So first of all, thank you for your time and your thoughts on all these questions. Now, if folks want to reach out to you either because they want help with their finances or they'd like to know more about your workout routine, right? Or how much you can bench press, I'm guessing at least 475.
Come on, Rob. Stop it.
Where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can simply go to CofieldAdvisors.com, and that's ADVISORS.com, or follow my Instagram handle, Cofield_advisor. I'm always dropping videos on personal finance and tax savings, things like that. But those are 2 places to find me.
So Instagram, I have 2 pictures that I've uploaded.
I noticed that, Rob. You put a picture together that had close to 400 something likes. So I tried to at your book.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
that's
but
right.
You didn't have an Instagram.
Well, I haven't so what's your handle on Instagram?
It's Cofield_advisor.
Here we are. I always wonder, like, what do money people put on? Well, look at this. You're like popular and you got your at parties and pretty people and wow, look at this. You're like a superstar.
I wouldn't say that, but that's an interesting question. Money people on Instagram. So it's a very fine line you have to walk because you want to show people who you are outside of work because you want people to understand, and relate to you personally. I believe as an advisor, you have to be able to relate to your clients in order to be successful. But you also want to be professional as well. So you got to tilt that line. It's a very, very tough line to stay in line on, but I think I've done a pretty good job.
So you've got this one picture next to this old looking guy with gray hair, which I now remember. It got actually some comments and stuff.
Yeah.
That's funny.
It was a great picture.
So we're going to finish the show as I always finish it. I'm going to put you on the spot because I'm going to ask you the final question of this show. And if you've really listened to the podcast, you will know the answer. And this is how we're ending. Sir, are you ready for it? What's the best thing money can buy?
Financial freedom.
Nailed it.
300 episodes. I think I was going to drop that. Come on.
All right, man. Be good.
All right. Have a good one.